Welcome to the Doo-Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. I'm your host, Suzan Chin-Taylor, CEO and founder of Creative Raven, the firm that helps wastewater industry contractors and manufacturers unlock the power of digital marketing, AI, and PR to boost sales and opportunities. Whether it's through our online marketing and lead generation programs or providing a fully outsourced marketing department, we are passionate about helping businesses in the wastewater and civil infrastructure sectors not just survive, but thrive in today's digital world. Each episode, I'll be bringing you expert tips and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Let's dive in. Well, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Doo-Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, I have the privilege of visiting with Daniel Dominguez, Chief Growth Officer of the Y Institute. So thank you for coming and being on the show with me today, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me, Susan. I've been looking forward to this interview just because of the title of your show. I said to myself, do I want to be on something like that? But after meeting you and seeing the work that you do and the information you put out, I couldn't wait to be on. And it's been a pleasure to get to know you in this process.
Oh, well, same here, Dan. So many of you may be wondering, the Y Institute, what the heck is this? And what does this have to do with the wastewater industry? Well, directly, it doesn't. But indirectly, as something that I really wanted to bring to the forefront for everybody in the industry as a tool, I felt it was interesting and important to make people aware of it. I went through the process myself, and I found it absolutely fascinating. So I don't want to have a spoiler alert here, because we're going to talk about a little bit about what happened with me later on in the broadcast. But this is a tool that, whether you are a manufacturer, a service provider, right, contractor in any facet of the industry, a municipal worker, an engineer, basically any level, anywhere you are in your career or what you're responsible for, this is a tool that really can be beneficial to everybody. So without, further ado, I am going to let Dan kind of explain to our audience today, what is the Y Institute and what is this why?
Sure. Thank you so much, Susan. And thanks for having me on. This is a different industry than what we normally talk to. So the Y Institute began as an idea 12 years ago when our founder and CEO, Gary Sanchez, listened to Simon Sinek's TED Talk, where he told everybody, you need to start with why, right? You need to know your why, communicate from your why. You got to know your how, and then your what. And he explained to us that when we communicate from our why, we communicate better. We connect with people better. However, most of us talk about our what first. We say, hey, I'm an accountant, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a salesperson, I'm the chief growth officer. We love to tell people what we do. However, when we start with why, if we let people know why we do what we do, we connect differently. So my why is to contribute to the success of others and make a positive impact. So if instead of telling you, hey, I'm the chief growth officer at Y Institute, and I've been in sales my entire career, I've got 30 years of sales experience, and I've led teams at a high level at Fortune 100 companies, your eyes start to glaze over after about the third thing that I list. But if instead I say to you, Susan, I believe that success begins when I contribute to the success of others and help them achieve their goals. It's a different kind of connection. And Simon taught that to us 12 years ago. What's different about us, where the Y Institute came from, is Gary listened to that interview, that TED Talk, and he called Simon and called him up and said, hey, Simon, I listened to your TED Talk and I want to know my why. Can you help me discover my why? And they spent some time together, months together, trying to figure out what Gary's why was. Well, it turns out his why is to find a better way and share it with others. Well, after 8 months with Simon, guess what he said? He's like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And he became obsessed with it. So over the next 2 years, he spent the 10,000 hours that we all talk about becoming an expert on why. He was a dentist at the time. So he took every patient that came in, he had a captive audience. He'd ask them, why do you do what you do? And after months and months, after about 24 months of interviewing all his patients, If you were sitting next to him on a plane, guess what, Suzan? He was going to discover your why. If you were standing next to him at the grocery store, he became obsessed with it. And after doing thousands of interviews, he realized that there are 9 whys. And so I'll share those with you later, but there are 9 whys and everybody has one. And when you discover your why, you can communicate from it. And then recently, which you got to participate in, we've developed the why operating system, which helps us discover your why, your how, and your what in a short 10-minute process. And that allows you to communicate why you do what you do, how you go about doing it, and what it is that people can count on from you. So that's my Cliff's Notes version of the origin of the Why Institute.
Okay, so when you go through the process, how can it be utilized effectively for companies? What are the ways that they can use it? It's very obvious, team building, but one of the things that it is an issue right now in our industry, and that is, and even through this great resignation, is you can find people, but finding the right people and then retaining them. You can train them, but retain them. And I think sometimes the retaining might be coming from, maybe they didn't understand what the job entailed, or maybe the job that you were offering them was not something that was really, like you were saying, was going to speak to their why or their heart. And so that's what really popped into my mind, is why I had to have you on the show, because could using a tool like this really help a company get the right people? And even within their own company, when it comes time to promote.
Right. Absolutely.
Is that person the person you want to offer the job to? And do they even want it?
Yeah.
They may just say yes because they don't want to offend you, because it's an honor, because you're promoting them. But deep down, they may be like, oh God, I really don't want this job. But they're too afraid to say, no, I'd rather stay where I am.
Right.
So can you speak to that?
Absolutely.
How that works?
Absolutely. And let's do something too, so we can ground everybody on the process. So let me give you the 9 whys so that everybody knows what the 9 whys are. If you're somebody that likes to take notes, this is time to get out your piece of paper and take notes, because it'll ground the rest of the conversation. So there are 9 whys. The first one is contribute. People with the why of contribute love to help others. They love to be part of causes that are bigger than themselves and make a positive impact in the lives of others. We know these people because they're the ones that we can count on. If you ask them to do something, they raise their hand, and they're the go-to people in every company. Contributes are great people to have on our teams. The second why is trust. Trust people are people who believe that trust is the most important thing. For them, if they trust you and you trust them, sky's the limit. But if you violate their trust, it can be a real deal breaker for them. So we want to know that why, because for them, we don't want to be late to an appointment with them. If we said 3 o'clock, we better show up, because it means a lot to them that you don't lie to them. Trust is very important. So it's good to know. The third one is make sense. People with the why of make sense love to solve problems. They're really good at taking in lots of data and then giving you a recommendation. And they're very quick thinkers. In companies, we call them the problem solvers. People like throwing the problems at them because they're really good at saying, I know what you need to do. Great people to have on our team. And I think all the whys are great to have on our team, as long as we have them in the right role, right? The next one, number 4, is better way. People with the why of better way are always innovating. They love to take things that exist and make them better. So they'll take something that somebody else has created, make some tweaks, and show it to you. The thing about that is, it's Gary's why. They love to share their innovations. They love to, the way they contribute is by finding better ways and sharing them with others. They're not selfish about what they developed, and they share it with others. The next one is right way. People with the why of right way love to do things consistently. They like to follow systems and processes and deliver consistent, reliable results. So these are the people in a company that create the systems and processes, the policies and procedures, and they're the ones you can count on doing things the right way, because guess what? There's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, and you can count on them doing it right. So very reliable. Every successful company that we work with has a right way person on their executive board that is in charge of kind of making sure things run the way they're supposed to run. The next why is probably our most fun one, challenge. These are people that love to challenge the status quo, do things differently, think outside the box. These are the people that always say, why do we have to do it that way? Let's make it fun. So these are people, if you have them in your company, you put them in a box and they're going to wilt. You give them an opportunity to be creative and they're going to flourish. So make sure they're in a job where they're not, you put those people in a, do this exactly the way I said to do it every day, and they are going to quit very soon. You give them an opportunity to just give them guardrails and say, hey, do everything, we'll do it however you want to do, as long as you follow these rules, they're going to flourish and do great. And then the last three are least common ones. Mastery, especially in your industry. These are the people that get PhDs in water treatment, right? They understand, they love to learn at a deep level. In a company, they're the subject matter experts. And these are people that, as I said, love understanding and learning things at a very deep level. For them, surface level knowledge is not enough. And then number 8 is clarify. People who love to make things very clear. So these are people that want to be understood and they want to make sure they understand you. How you recognize them is they're the people, when you give a presentation, Susan, that keep everybody else after because they have questions. I have one more question, because until they're clear, they're not ready to move forward. That presentation can't end until they've got all their questions answered. And so we know these people, great detailed people. You want them reviewing your contracts because they're going to look for every little thing. And they're going to ask the questions that need to be asked. And then the final one is simplify. People with the why of simplify like to keep things simple. They talk in bullets. They'll call you and say, Susan, this is what I need. Boom, boom, boom. And this is what I want from you. Boom, boom, boom. And here's the summary of what I'm doing for you. Boom, boom, boom. They like to communicate simply. They like things simple. They often ask, what's the bottom line? So now that we know the 9 whys, we can talk about, wouldn't it be awesome if you knew the why of everybody that works for you, so that you can make sure you have them in the right role? You know, a lot of times when we're looking to promote, right, we take that superstar salesperson and we say, oh, let's make them the sales manager. We don't know whether, and what if your sales management, especially in an industry like yours, requires that you know a lot of technical stuff. You keep a lot of reports, right? That you maintain very strict records of what you've done. Maybe you have a CRM. What if this person's why is to challenge the status quo and think outside the box? The very reason they flourished in sales was because their schedule was different every day. They didn't know who they were going to see. Every day was a new adventure, and that's what they loved about sales. Now they're managing people, and there's a schedule to follow, and there's reports you have to do, and they hate it. So you take somebody who was loving life and was performing at a really high level, and now you've put them in a role where they're possibly very unhappy because they don't get to do what they love to do, which is connect with people, do things differently every day, and be creative. So that's just one example using 1 why. You know, the other thing is we can, when we're interviewing for a job, and you remember this, Susan, when we're young and we're interviewing for a job, you know what? We want a job. So you can ask us any question. Hey, so, you know, do you know accounting? Of course, I took accounting in college. So great. Well, you know, you're dressed nice. You look conservative. I think you'll make a great accountant. And we hire that person. Well, what if that person's why is to find a better way and share it with others? You know, there's not a lot of fudge in accounting rules, right? You can't find a better way to do it. There's just a certain way you've got to do it. And so once again, we're putting someone in a position where perhaps their natural gift of doing things better, finding a better way and innovating isn't getting used. And you can do that with all of the whys. You know, the other one that's, you know, opposite of better way and challenge is right way. People who love to do things, follow the process, have systems. You put them in your marketing department and you give them no guidance, and you just say, hey, come up with an ad campaign. They're going to say, well, what are the rules? What do I have to do? When do you need it? What's the timeline? And you're saying, hey, be creative. Give me something, you know, tomorrow. Well, I need, what time, what exactly do you need? Every why is going to ask different questions. And so again, let's put people where they can thrive. I think that's probably the biggest gift that we give to people. And then when we really look deeply at not just their why, their how, not just their why, but their how and their what, then we really get a clear picture of what motivates a person to do what they do.
Thank you for that. You know, you kind of triggered a memory for me in that many, many years ago, very early in my working career, I went for an interview, and maybe they didn't do the Y Institute, but they used NLP, neuro linguistic programming,
Yes.
and asked me some very pointed questions, which I thought were very strange during the interview.
Right.
And at the time, I was, believe it or not, I was an accountant at one point in my life.
Uh-huh.
And I'm so far like not that type of personality, but yet there are things about me that I do like to be very exact and very precise, and things in order, things in a column. That, you know, my husband teases me that when you look up the word anal retentive in the dictionary, there's an etching, a picture of my face right there in that dictionary. And so there are, you know, in some ways I fall into that category. And so later, when they called me and offered me the job, and they said, well, to be honest, we don't want to offer you the job that you applied for. We want to offer you a job to do design and content development for our training and course materials and some of our promotional items. And I thought, wow. And that was probably my first segue from moving from being purely an accountant into doing something in the marketing field. And then realized this is where I was supposed to be all along. Right. And so that's very, very interesting, that these premises behind not putting people into a slot. Right. And we talked a little bit earlier about, you know, especially in our industry, there's this almost a division of the blue collar, the white collar. Right. But nowadays, there's a blurring of those lines. Because with all of the new technologies that are coming out in our industry, those folks that we traditionally looked at as the hands-on, the blue collar role, right, are now having to be as savvy and have skill sets and knowledge that traditionally were only something that the white collar workers had to do. And so we need to bridge those gaps to understand. And I think using a tool like this and other types of profile assessments to understand each other is only going to help bridge that divide and create better workplace cultures all around, so that we will be able to attract those people that we want to attract. Because word is going to get out. If you've got a great workplace culture, and you know this, people are going to be telling their friends about it, that, hey, there's going to be a job opening. This is a great place to work. You may want to come.
Yes.
That it may not be hard for us to find good people and then keep them, because we're creating an environment that they look forward to coming to work every day, because they're doing something that they wanted to do because you understood them before they even came to work. Or, you know, like you were saying, that you may have someone in a position, yes, he's good, but those talents might be able to be used elsewhere where he could really benefit your organization even further than he is today. I'd like for you to explain just real quickly how the process works when someone does a Y discovery and what comes out on the other side, and then maybe cite an example. And you can use me as an example of, you know, what happened from start to finish.
Absolutely. So the YOS discovery. So we are the Y Institute, and we used to only have the Y assessment. In 2021, we invested to create the YOS discovery. So this is your Y operating system, and all of them are based in your beliefs and motivation. So when I sent you the discovery, Susan, you took it. It takes only about 10 minutes. You answer about 38 questions, but there are about 2,700 possible question combinations. So the discovery is logic based. So every time you answered a question, it threw out a couple hundred questions, because it said, okay, she's not going that way. Once it figured out your why, it got to work on discovering your how. Okay, how is it that she brings her why to life? And then once it figured that out, it started asking questions around your what. What is it that people can count on from you? So using you as an example, we know that you're a person that is your YOS is contribute, make sense, and trust. So what's important to you? If I were to introduce you to someone that knows the 9 whys, I would say, look, this is Susan. She believes that success begins when we make a positive impact in the lives of others. Now, how she goes about doing that is by making sense of the complex and challenging. She loves solving problems. You can throw a lot of problems at Susan, and she's going to be like, Thank you. Let me give you solutions, because that's what she likes to do. That's what she's gifted at. And that's how she contributes. So it's how she brings her why of contribute to life. And her what is trust. What that tells us is that she values trust. And so what that means is that if she says she's going to do something, you can count that it's going to get done. So now I'm introducing you to someone, and I'm talking about your greatest strengths. You want to hire Suzan? Guess what? She's going to be committed to contributing to the success of your company. How she's going to do that is she's going to find the problems that you have and give you solutions. That's what she loves doing, making sense of the complex and challenging. And guess what else she does? She can be trusted. She's somebody you can count on. So who wouldn't want to work with somebody who cares about their success, wants to make sense of their challenging and complex problems, and is dependable? So now we're talking about your strengths, right? And we want to make sure we put you in a role where people are going to give you problems, because if they're giving you problems to solve, guess what? You're happy. And that's where your energy is, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, it was very enlightening, because it kind of went right along with, this is going to be my next question, is when I went through my own training for everything DISC and had to take my own profile, and I wound up being an I, a very high I, but with a tail down into C, which again, the accounting background, which they thought was
Right.
kind of strange. But then when I gave them my background, it was like, okay, well, that made a lot of sense.
Mhm.
And so being in an I, that means I'm an influencer. And
Right.
again, making a difference,
Right.
wanting to share ideas. And it was really interesting how they correlated so beautifully together. And so my question for you is, there are some people that may be familiar with having gone through a DISC assessment or some other
Right.
Myers-Briggs assessment. And so
Right.
how does this why differ from a profile assessment such as DISC or Myers-Briggs, and how do they complement each other?
Great question, Suzan. So here's what's different. We don't even call the why an assessment. We call it a discovery, because what we're looking at is motivations and beliefs, right? If we were to describe, if I were to put an I believe in front of your why, your how and what, I bet you would agree that I believe that success begins when we contribute to the success of others. I also believe that the way to do that is by helping them make sense of their complex and challenging issues. And I also believe that trust is very important. And I want to be someone you can count on. That's a belief system. That's what motivates you. So we're not there. You can't assess your beliefs. So that's why we don't call it an assessment. That's why we call it a discovery. In other assessments, you're assessing someone's strength. Clifton Strength Finders, we're looking at your strengths, right? We're assessing what are you strong in, what are you not. In DISC, we're assessing how you communicate. Are you an influencer? Are you a director, a driver? What is it that how is it that you're going to communicate most effectively? All the assessments assess things. That's why we call them assessments. The discovery, we call it a discovery because it's really just about asking the questions. There's 2,700 possible question combinations that lead us to what it is that motivates you and that you believe in.
Okay. So they really can complement each other in putting together a very strong workplace culture, and
Well,
building good teams that learn how to work together.
so you're a DISC expert. So you're certified, and that's what you do. Imagine having that knowledge along with somebody's why, how, and what. And that's how in our training, when we work with our certified coaches that get trained in how to do this, we walk them through, okay, now that you know the first dimension, their why, and you get the second and third dimension, their how and what. Now let's add on that fourth assessment. That assessment, whatever it's DISC, Colby, Myers-Briggs, that gives you a fourth dimension that is really a great way for you to understand your team, not only in terms of their beliefs and motivations, but how they're going to bring those to life, right? How are they going to act on them? Are they going to be a high I? Great. You know that they're an influencer, they're a leader, but you also know now that Suzan is motivated by contributing to success of others, making sense of the complex, and building trust. And by the way, she's going to be a great influencer in your company. So let's look for a role where she can flourish. let's make sure that we set her up for success. And sometimes we have people that are in the wrong roles. We had that recently. We were working with a blue collar company that was going through the business YOS with us, and they're a striping company, and they had moved one of their best salespeople into a management role. Well, he was not happy. They couldn't figure out why he wasn't happy. Well, he was being asked to work outside of his comfort zone. The reason he liked being in sales is because he was a connector. He had contribute and trust in his top three. He likes being with people, and he liked challenging the status quo, being different. Now, as we talked about earlier, salespeople are salespeople because they don't want to be in a 9 to 5 sitting in front of a computer, but that's what they had done. So the owner came to us after, and we started talking, and we said, well, these are his, this is what drives him, and this is what he's doing. That doesn't seem like we have a match. And so let's figure out where he'd rather be. And so they figured out a role change, and now we've got a happy employee again. So retention, as we talked about earlier, during this great resignation, retention is important. Allowing people to live. And I said it on another podcast, it's their zone of genius. Your zone of genius is when you're helping people, helping them solve problems, and you're building trust. If you can do that all day, you're not going to run out of energy. So let's give you opportunities to do that. And let's find that out about everybody we work with. And it creates a great workplace culture.
Absolutely. That at the end of the day, that's what it is creating a culture that
Right.
people, it may not, people most often when they leave, it very rarely is about the money unless there's something really catastrophic going on in their life that requires,
Right.
some financial, they're having a financial struggle. Most people will leave because they feel that they're not being valued.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a wrong position, like you were saying. They're not being heard.
Mm-hmm.
They're not being heard, and they're not being given a chance to weigh in.
Right.
And so I really want to appreciate, I really want to just say, I really appreciate you shedding light on the differences in the profiles, because I have, this is why I became a DISC trainer, was I felt that it just brought a lot to the table that could help companies. And
Right.
for me, everybody says, well, why this? You're really a marketing person.
Right.
Because to me, every single member of your team
Mm-hmm.
is a member of the marketing department.
Right.
Because at some point, even in some small way, every person is or will have the potential of coming in contact with your customer.
Right.
And so when they do, you want to make sure that that customer has the best possible experience.
Absolutely.
And, very often you'll get a team, like if I was saying, if you start noticing that there's a lot of turnover in one particular department,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the people that are leaving.
Right.
More often than not, it's the person they have to report to, that they
Right.
just are like, you don't pay me enough to deal with this. You can give me a raise, but you don't pay me enough to deal with this. So I'm out of here. I'm going to go someplace else. And you were saying about the why. I think the why is beautiful, because most times when there's a big decision to be made company wide,
Yeah.
if you let everybody weigh in and give
Mm-hmm.
their opinion, which also comes from the why, I
Right.
want to contribute based on what drives me.
Right.
That even if their idea or their opinion doesn't get incorporated into a decision, most often they can live with it.
Mm-hmm.
More times than not, they can live with it because they got heard. At least they got a chance to be heard. And so these are all things that I think there's just a real dynamic shift in the workplace these days.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, during COVID, where we all got so disconnected from each other that I think we really lost sight of who we were.
Right.
As people, our own human connection to ourselves, that human connection got broken. And so I think now more than ever, as we are returning, now most people in this industry were considered essential workers. So some people were working from home, or they, did different shifts, and we had to still work with each other. But during COVID, there was an absolute rawness
Mm-hmm.
to the emotions.
Hmm.
in how we were dealing with one another.
Right.
Because whether we want to admit it or not, we were all going through grief,
Yeah.
grief over maybe someone we lost, but most of us were going through grief over that way of life that we'd gotten so comfortable with and took for
Yes.
granted. And all of a sudden it was taken away from us. And
Yes.
suddenly, and we didn't have time to prepare. And so we were grieving it. And so I truly believe that using training tools like this, and I don't really want to say they're training tools, but human element tools that
Hmm.
can help us reconnect as human beings is really going to make a true difference in
Yeah.
how we go forward in this new normal that we're all dealing with. And so um, I just, I can't say enough. Thank you for all the information that you have shared today. And for those of you out there that are interested in exploring this further, Daniel is available to speak to you, to connect with you. You can find him on LinkedIn, Daniel Dominguez, again, Chief Growth Officer from the Y Institute. I would encourage you to explore the yinstitute.com and what they have to offer, and just taking it for yourself. It's an inexpensive gift. What is it, Daniel? I think the assessment to take for yourself is what,
So,
$47 to
so
just
it's
go on and do.
47. Yeah. If you want
Yes.
to just know your why, it's $47. If you want to know your full why operating system, it's $97. And you can buy it for yourself, and you can buy a gift for someone. A lot of people do that because who doesn't want to know the why of their spouse? It's okay to know your own, but you want to know what's driving your spouse. And a lot of times there's a lot of clarity that can be gained from understanding, oh, that's why Dan is always volunteering for everything. And my wife knows that now. She's like, he's a contributor. If you need help, call Dan. He's going to help. And so she has the grace now to forgive that. She's a clarifier. So she asks a lot of questions, and it used to drive me nuts. But now I know, hey, that's just her nature. That's who she is. Let her ask her questions and let me answer them. Because once I answer her questions, then she's ready to move forward.
And it's so cool because I went through the same experience. And after I went through my profile and I
Yes.
got a free one, I put my husband through it and looked at what he was, looked at what I was, and went, oh, that explains a whole heck of a lot as to why we would butt heads, or why I could see him getting, irritated in certain discussions. It was like, he's a high D and
Yeah.
I'm a high I. D's like to get, it's sort of like adjust the facts, ma'am. Get
Yep.
to the point. When you were saying about the bulletizing,
Yes.
conversationalist, where
Yes.
an influencer, they get so excited that very
Mhm.
often, I'm a talker, I'm a
Yes.
storyteller. But with a D, I can totally overwhelm a D with that. And so
Right.
I've had to learn that in a business scenario, when I sense that someone might be a D, I can do a little bit of fluff, but I've got to really shorten
Right.
my story to Reader's Digest instead of the full tome.
Yeah. And we do the same thing with the whys. I think, that's that high D, just get to the bottom line, has got some simplify, some make sense in them. And there's
Yes,
different, right? That we're only talking about 4 quadrants, but they're 4 quadrants with tails and parts of it. So there's really
yes.
probably the 9. And then with a high I is probably a challenger, somebody who's a contributor that wants to just, hey, let's have some fun. Let's talk, right? Let's connect. I'll tell you the other valuable thing, and I don't know how much time we have left, but
We're good. We're
Gary
good.
Gary and I, our founder and CEO, have none of our top 3 in common. His YOS is better way, clarify, simplify. I am contribute, challenge, make sense. So there's not a lot of clarify and challenge. I just like to do things my own way. Better way is okay, but for me, with the challenge part of me, I want to help others, and I want to do it differently. And so I'm constantly coming up with ideas, constantly. That's just the way my mind works. And I throw them at Gary. And when we first started working together, because he's a better way guy, he would take those ideas and say, good idea, Dan. Let me work on it and make it better. Let me fix it. That's what it sounded like to me. Had I not known what his why was, I could have been offended, right? We see this in the workplace. I'd start telling myself a story like, oh, nothing I do is good enough. Everything I take to him, he has to fix. But because I know that that's his why, I know that he can't help himself. You can take him the most perfect thing, but he's going to find a way to make it better. That's what he does. So what I learned is, hey, instead of getting frustrated, I take stuff to him when I'm 60 to 80% done. And then I let him make it better. And then we have a finished product that has both my original idea made better by him, and we're both happy. And so it's about taking advantage of the strengths of the people on your team. So we posted about that on LinkedIn today. I think it's National Stress Reduction Month. We don't stress at Y Institute because we're all working in our whys. We make sure that when it comes time to assign a task, a process, something we're going to do, we say, okay, is Dan going to have the energy for that? Yeah, he might have some energy in the beginning, but not for a long time. So let's make sure we give that to someone who's going to have the energy for it, because they're going to enjoy doing it. Not only are they going to have the energy for it, they're going to enjoy it, right?
Wow. My head is just spinning with ideas right now on how this could be used to really help organizations. I even think it would be a great way to develop sales teams, really anything, or choosing, if you've got a big project and you need to get various people from various departments involved in making that project happen.
Right.
To make sure that you're choosing, from knowing this, picking your A team that can really work well together to get this thing done. And so I just see so many possibilities for this. So again, thank you, Dan, for sharing all of your information. And really, I encourage all of you out there that might be listening today, check it out. For me, it was, I don't know, maybe I could even say it was a freeing experience, because it gave me deeper insight into myself, and also what I don't like to do, even more so than what I do like to do. And so understanding why certain things make you uncomfortable allows you to figure out, okay, well, maybe I have to do that, but I'll figure out a way to get through that challenge and just know that this will pass. But there's a reason why I'm so uncomfortable doing that. And so that next time when somebody asks me to do something, I'm going to say, "Ooh, I didn't really like that last time. So no, I thank you, but no, thank you."
Right. Absolutely. I think, a lot of people have that kind of experience. And what I often hear, and I've done this hundreds of times with lots of people, is, I kind of knew that about myself, but the why discovery gave me the language to express it. And I think that there's something so freeing about being able to express it in a way that people can understand it in a simple, clear way that people can say, that's who Suzan is.
Right. So thanks again. And I may bring you back on to discuss some other things at a later time, and maybe even the DISC challenge and ways that we can really create more dynamic workplace cultures. And so thank you all for joining us on this week's episode of the Do Divas Smells Like Money podcast. More information is available about the Y Institute and Daniel in the site notes. And so until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you're ready to take your marketing to the next level and start increasing sales and opportunities for your business, reach out to us at Creative Raven. We're here to help you thrive in the digital landscape. Visit creativeraven.com or click the link in the show notes below to schedule a call and learn how we can support your growth. If you enjoyed the insights on today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you'll never miss an update. Until next time, keep growing and keep it flowing.